Everyone, Coach Drew here. In lieu of practice tonight being canceled, I wanted to give everyone a little bit of a resource, something that they can be chewing on, something that they can think about because we weren't able to be together as a team today. So I want to go over just a couple of things for you guys. I want to talk about some of the basic building blocks, technically speaking, of soccer. And the things and the way those building blocks fit together into the sport. And then I want to talk a little bit about tactics because, as you know, we're coming up on our first game. And, technique and skills have to have a foundation, a framework in which to go, which is what tactics is all about. And so we'll go over those things, and hopefully you guys can watch it. If you have any questions, let me know at practice on Wednesday, tomorrow, whenever you guys happen to watch this. I want to start by talking about kind of the building blocks of what makes a good soccer player. And these are all things that we will work on throughout the season because the goal is to develop you guys and make you guys better players. And keep in mind, this is basic, but even the pros come back to the basics. So as far as the building blocks are concerned, as far as skills with the ball, you have pretty much four primary categories of skills. And the first one that really is foundational to developing your feel of the ball is running with the ball. We also call this dribbling. So you see players take off with the ball at their feet, and it looks like it's glued to their foot, right? And what's really important in running with the ball is being able to manipulate it with both the inside and the outside of your foot. In tight spaces, when you're maybe shifting it from one side to the other, you have a defender on you, something like that. When you're playing the ball around with the inside of your foot, as opposed to when you are literally running with the ball. If you've taken off down the wing, perhaps you've beaten your player in a 1v1 battle, and now you're taking off down the field. Well, now how are you going to run with the ball? Well, you're going to want to run with the ball with the outside of your foot. This is going to allow you to improve speed, and it's going to give you a better chance to translate your dribble into a pass, into a shot, into a cut, getting by somebody, those types of things. Running with the ball is what will really develop your feel on the ball, and it will really help you become more comfortable and natural with the ball at your feet. First touch, and these two, dribbling, running with the ball, and first touch, these arguably are what soccer rests upon. If you can't control the ball, you can't play the game. As with dribbling, you have to be able to manipulate the ball when it's coming into you with either the inside or the outside of your feet. All right, left and right foot, inside and outside. And we'll work on all types of first touch. If the ball is coming to you along the ground, especially if it's quick, this can present a challenge, especially if the ball is bouncing. If the ball is coming in the air with any degree of pace to it, if the ball is curling or bending in the air, if the ball is ricocheting off of something, traveling at a high rate of speed, these are all challenges that you will have to deal with. But if you have a good first touch, then you're all set to make your next move. Another thing that we'll talk about that I didn't write here on the board is directional first touch. Directional first touch just means that you dictate where the ball goes when you control it. You don't react to what the ball does. You direct the ball when you take that first touch to set yourself up for success. Then we have passing. Of course, soccer is played with 11 people on the field, and no, you cannot dribble through everybody. I've seen it happen, or people attempt to do it before. Passing is how you win. It's how you tire the other team down. It's how you wear them out, and ultimately how you're going to control the game and win games. So left and right foot, most players have a foot that they're better with the other, and they prefer to get it onto their left or their right during the run of play. But you should be able to hit a pass with either foot, and so that's something we'll work on as well.
Finally, striking the ball. And this category involves some advanced techniques. Specifically, if you're shooting, under shooting, you can either shape the ball where you're curling it into a corner, putting some shape into it, whether it's curling away from the keeper or towards him. And this gives you a little higher degree of accuracy, but not as much power. Shooting, you can also hit it with the laces, with your foot locked. This will give you more power, but it's harder to control. We'll talk about that as well. Driven passes, you've seen where players will hit the ball through the air 30, 40, 50 plus yards to a teammate across the field. And this is something that can open up the game, get the ball from one side of the field to the other in a hurry. And it's an advanced technique as well. But we will hopefully get to work on some finishing techniques and some longer driven passing techniques as well. So these are the building blocks. These are the things that you should be looking at. If you can construct these 4 technical proficiencies in a good way, then you're going to improve dramatically at the sport. And that's one of the things that I really want to be able to do for you guys, is to make you technically proficient. All right, let me talk to you guys just a little bit about tactics and about gameplay. All right, so we talked about the building blocks. We talked about what constitutes soccer and what are the technical proficiencies that you want as a soccer player. But now, how do we put this together into something holistic in the model of the game of soccer? So, of course, you have 11 players, you have a goalkeeper, and you have 10 outfield players. Again, I'm not assuming anything. We have some people who are very experienced with soccer. We have some who've never played it before in their lives. So, we have our keeper, right? And his primary task is to keep the ball out of the net. You can touch the ball inside this area called the 18-yard box with his hands and nowhere else. And we have 10 outfield players who, of course, may not do the job of the goalkeeper. There's a couple of different ways. In fact, there's pretty much unlimited ways tactically that a soccer team can set up. But a pretty common way, a pretty simple but effective way, and one that we'll probably use, I assume we'll experiment with many as we go and learn more about our players, is the 4-3-3. So what that means is 4, so we always start, the first number is our defenders. The second number, the 3, is our midfielders. And the third number, again a 3, is our forwards. So we have 4 in the back once again, 3 in the midfield, and we have 3 up top. Now the reason this is a great tactical setup is that there's a lot of variability to it, especially with your 2 central defenders. We can call them center backs, we can call them center defenders. We can either have them next to each other, which is called a flat 4, as you can see they're flat. But also what we can do is we can play one of them in front of the other, and we can have a sweeper who's cleaning up. We can have a stopper in front whose main job is, of course, to stop the ball. They'll be putting in tackles. They'll be marking whoever the forward is for the other team. They're going this direction. Whoever this guy is responsible for him. So again, we can either play flat across in the back, or we can play a sweeper and a stopper. Into the midfield, we have 3 in here. 3 central midfielders. All right, and especially if you're playing a 4-3-3, particularly at higher levels, you're not going to have these midfielders particularly spaced out, because that leaves your central midfielder pretty isolated. When I played for West Academy, we did 4-3-3 a lot, and we were very aggressive. We pushed our forwards on the outside very high, and we pushed our midfielders out wide. So oftentimes you had one central midfielder in here by himself. That doesn't really work a ton, particularly at high levels, unless you are completely dominant over the other team. So what happens is these 3 central midfielders tend to form a triangle. And ideally, these 3 can switch out with one another at any given time. If this guy goes forward and attacks down this side, for example, then his buddy, his other central midfielder, can fill in the gap, and vice versa. We can rotate around. We can play with that. The goal is to have these three midfielders be communicating with each other, and it's important that these guys have great ball handling skills. You want them to be able to keep the ball under pressure, so that's where our dribbling and our first touch and our control that we talked about comes into play. As far as our forwards are concerned, we have three. So we have a central forward, and then we have wingers, outside forwards. We often call them wingers. Now, if our midfielders are playing a little bit more centrally, right? Because like we said, if they have to be nice and compact, not compact necessarily, but they have to be connected to each other, then what's going to happen? See all this space right here on the edges? Well, that's where these guys come into play. You want fast, high energy, high intensity players who have good endurance, good stamina, who are running these edges right here, because they're going to be tracking all the way from here, right? All the way from here, keeping that 10 to 15 yard distance, right? And then they're going to be going all the way up into the attack, right? They're going to be all the way up here. They're going to be putting crosses in. They're going to be attacking, trying to score goals. So that's what these wingers are going to be doing, and they'll be spending a lot of time running up and down the sideline area. This guy right here, the center forward, his job is to score goals. That's what we want him to do. Of course, there's a lot more nuance to that, but his basic job description is score. The way he does that is he's going to stay up pretty high. So imagine right here, 1, 2, 3, 4. Imagine, well, I'll tell you what, I'll just do this. Imagine you have the red team is defending, right? This is what this would look like with the red back line. Our forward, he's going to be floating around in here, right? He's going to be floating around, and then he's going to pop up. He's going to receive the ball. So let's just say this other red one is a ball, right? And then he can play to his other teammates who can then move forward, right? A lot of times once the ball gets down here in this final third of the field, he's just going to be poaching in this 18-yard box area. He's just going to be waiting and lurking for an opportunity to score. But our center forward, it's his job to score goals. And also, if the red team puts us under pressure, right, and they're down here attacking us, and we get the ball out of our danger zone, if we clear it up the field, it's his job to be the one to get to the ball and hang on to it. So again, first touch, very important. So that is pretty much the 4-3-3 right there. Once again, our 4 in the back, where we can either play flat or we can play with a sweeper and a stopper. We have our 3 in the midfield, who will be interchangeable, working with each other. They'll be passing, they'll be responsible. Pretty much the ball is going to travel through this midfield trio right here. That's who's creating the attack. We have our wingers, who are covering our flanks, and we have our center forward, who's putting pressure on the back line and who's trying to score some goals. All right. Another basic formation that we can play and that we will play is the 4-4-2. You'll notice there are some similarities to the 4-3-3. First of all, we have 4 in the back, and once again, we can have a flat back 4, or we can have staggered center backs, center defenders, where we have a sweeper who's cleaning up. We have a stopper who is the enforcer. He's helping our midfield out. So we have that. Our midfield, though, is where it starts to get a little bit different. Instead, we have 4 across, and we have 2 in the midfield. All right, 2 in the center midfield. And now, this is a very either attacking or defending mindset with this strategy, with this formation, depending on what these guys are doing, our outside midfielders. All right, they're not really wingers anymore because we have 4 in the midfield instead of 3. All right, so 4 across, and these guys can either sit in really tight and compact, right, and be very defensive minded, or these guys can push them up and say, hey, go into the attack. So these guys can function as wingers in that they'll get really high up the field. So as you can see, immediately, we just went from a 4-4-2 defensively to a 4-4-2 offensively, where instead of 4 backs, 4 midfielders, and 2 forwards, we now have 4 forwards and 4 midfielders and only 2 guys in defense. All right, it's a little bit more complicated than that. In practice, there's a lot of things to think about, but practically speaking, that's what it can look like, right? So we have, again, 4 in the back, 4 in the midfield, and then we have 2 forwards, all right, instead of 1. Sometimes 1 forward can have a little bit of a hard go of it if he's up there by himself fighting 2 or 3 defenders. So how we'll often solve this is if we're possessing the ball well back here and we can afford to send an extra man forward, then we will. Now, these 2 forwards are not going to serve the exact same purpose, all right? Right here, I just have them positioned next to each other so you can see in the formation. But in reality, these 2 guys are going to be moving around, right? They're going to be moving back and forth. And a lot of times what's going to happen is, remember what we said in the 4-3-3, how that 1 forward, he's poaching, right? He's up here. His teammates are trying to play it into him. He can lay it off. We can go up. We can score goals, right? You'll have a player, you can have a forward who plays that kind of role, who's hanging out here as a target man, but you're probably not going to have 2 target men because that's not really a great use of your personnel. Instead, what this guy will probably do is he will float almost into the midfield. Now, we call this sometimes a false 9 role, and that just comes from, the 9 comes from soccer's numbering system, where 9 refers to forwards. So, the reason he's called a false 9 is because he looks like a forward, but sometimes he'll drop back into the midfield, right? Sometimes all the way back into the midfield to possess the ball, help us build out from the back. Sometimes he'll sit right underneath the target man. So, for example, if we have our midfielder right with the ball and he plays it into our target man, look who's right here to receive the ball, right? This guy probably has pressure on his back, so he can just play the ball here, and then off we go, and then everybody is going up as well. So even though we have what looks like 2 forwards just playing next to each other, we actually have a dynamic situation where one of the forwards is more of a target man, perhaps, where they're playing balls into him, one where he's just going to be sitting in front of the goal looking to score, and another guy who's going to be almost more of a midfielder who's going to be roaming around with a little bit more freedom underneath. All right, so once again, to review with the 4-4-2, we have 4 across the back. We can have a sweeper and a stopper, or we can have a flat back 4. We have 4 in the midfield, right, with outside midfielders who function more of that as midfielders and less of wingers who are going up and down the sidelines. 2 center midfielders, right, who can play either next to each other or front and back, almost in a diamond. You see how we form a diamond here in that position? We can play like that, or we can play like this in the midfield. Also, what we can do is we can have these 2 forwards, all right, the 2 in the 4-4-2, where one of them is going to be sort of an adventurous guy who gets lots of freedom to create and do fun things, and another guy who gets to do more fun things, which is score goals. So that is the 4-4-2, and so I hope you guys enjoyed that little rundown of soccer formations. Very basic. There's a lot of nuance to it that we can discuss further as we go. And the thing is, even the pros are constantly learning about this. There's always more room to improve. There's more room to learn. The beauty of soccer is that it is a simple sport on its face, but the complexity of tactics, the complexity of strategy is almost limitless, which is why I love the game. And hopefully you guys found some of this talk about tactics and about positioning interesting. If you have any questions, ask me at practice, shoot me an email, whatever. I'd be happy to talk about this stuff because I am a total nerd for this. I love it. It's so interesting. And I'm excited to get to actually work on this stuff with you guys in practice and in games. So until next time, and I will see you guys soon.